Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending this Securing Our Streets, Safe Roads for Everyone, Everywhere session. My name is Megan Phillips, and I'm the Division 11 board member. I'm excited to be back for a second day of the 2024 summit, and thank you all for being here so much. As a reminder to anyone posting to social media throughout the summit, please use the hashtag NCTranspo2024. I'd like to introduce the panel's moderator, Brian Mayhew, NC State traffic engineer. He is a proud NC State graduate who has spent nearly 30 years studying and examining traffic and implementing programs to increase safety for drivers, cyclists, pedestrians across our great state. Thank you.
Good morning. It's great to see everybody here today. Appreciate you guys attending this very good session we have put together about safe roads for everyone. I'm Brian Mayhew, State Traffic Engineer with NCDOT, and this session is, we've got 4 great panelists. We're going to cover topics that range from new funding mechanisms, pedestrian facilities, interchange design, road diets. We've got a lot of varied topics here, from program policy and implementation. So definitely, again, appreciate you all being here this morning. First up, we have Jessica Rich. Jessica has been with FHWA for more than 20 years, the last 2 in FHWA Office of Safety as Program Manager for Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So please give everybody a warm welcome for Jessica.
Good morning. And what he left off is I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, and I'm from New Bern. So this is home for me, but I live in Nashville, Tennessee, not D.C. like you would think I do. But nothing wrong with D.C. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you about this wonderful discretionary grant program that was created in 2021 with the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed by Congress, and it put aside $5 billion, which is $1 billion per year, to provide funding for local governments to conduct safety projects and planning and helping us to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. And so to date, we have given awards in over 1,000 communities. There are 1,145 planning and demonstration grants as of last Friday. We announced 99 more grants last Friday. And then there are 85 implementation grants. We just had our second deadline for the FY 2024 cycle end on May the 16th. And then if anyone wants to submit applications, there's an August 29th deadline, and that one is just for planning and demonstration grants. So we have awarded more than $1.7 billion so far, and we have 2 more cycles to go. So who can apply for this program? It is any entity that is considered a political subdivision of a state. And so those are local governments, local cities, counties, MPOs, some colleges and universities can apply, transit authorities, and tribal governments. The types of activities that you can apply for, we have 2 types of activities: planning and demonstration grants, which includes action planning, Vision Zero plans, local road safety plans. You can also do supplemental planning and demonstration projects. And then we have implementation grants, which includes any activities that you have listed from your safety action plan. And then you can also apply for supplemental and demonstration activities. The components of a safety action plan are listed here, and I will just go through some of them. It all starts with a commitment from your leadership, whether that be a mayor or a director of transportation, saying that you would like to improve safety in your community, on your roadways, and you want to set a goal. So when I was the safety engineer for Tennessee, we had a goal to reduce fatalities by 10% by 2008, and we did make that goal. But you want to set a goal that is achievable. Your planning structure, that's going to consist of those who are all involved in highway safety, so that it's not just engineers, but also planners. You may have law enforcement on this committee. You may have a very passionate council person on this committee. But you want people who are knowledgeable of what's going on and will help you develop this plan. Engagement and collaboration, that's, again, part of the planning structure. Safety analysis, knowing where the crashes are, pulling out those crash reports and identifying the areas of improvement, that's very important. Equity considerations, that is a big focus of this administration, and so you want to find those areas where, they may not have access to transit, or they may not have adequate walking facilities. So you want to think about those things when you're developing your safety action plan. Policy and process changes, that can happen on the government level, as well as your council level. Strategy and project selections, and then progress and transparency is your evaluation plan. How well did the plan go, and what improvements can be made for the next time. Safety planning activities include topical complementary safety plans. So you might want to do a lighting plan. Lighting reduces crashes by 25%, so you may want to put lights all over your city so that crashes can get better. You can also do pedestrian and bicycle planning. There's all types of topical action plans. Road safety audits, which is one of my favorite areas, where you go out with a team and you look at locations and see what kind of safety problems are happening and try to come up with solutions. You can do some additional safety data collection. I know that data collection is a little difficult, but you can use the funding to do some better safety data collection. Equity assessments, engagement and collaborations with stakeholders, or you can update an existing action plan if you already have one. And then demonstration projects are quick build strategies or temporary strategies where you can test out solutions and see if you really want to move forward in implementing those technologies. You can also do some MUTCD engineering studies with the proper approvals, because there are approvals that go with MUTCD studies. Don't go out there testing purple sidewalks. Don't do that, because we might not like that. It might be too dark. Any kind of demonstration project that is not going to take a long time, is not going to be out there a long time, and will help inform your safety action plans. And then we have implementation grant activities. These are the different types of implementation grant activities. And when we are selecting the projects, we evaluate each of those using the criteria listed here. So safety impact is the most important one. We want to know where the crashes are located, what's going on, and how do you think you will improve those locations. For equity, engagement, and collaboration, we want to know if those locations may or may not be in a place where you're having some equity concerns. Engagement, collaboration, did you go out into the community and talk to them about some of the projects that you want to do? Effective practices and strategies, we have in Federal Highway, in our Office of Safety, we have proven safety countermeasures. I think we're up to about 29 of those now, and so we want to see if you're going to use any of those. Complete Streets is also another one that just makes our eyes just well up whenever we see those in evaluating the applications. And then we have these other DOT goals: climate and sustainability, workforce, and economic competitiveness. These are in almost all of the discretionary grant programs, and so we just want to know, how is this going to improve the environment? Are you going to reduce gas emissions? Are you going to improve the labor force? Are you going to do any job creation? Just things like that. That's what we're looking for when we evaluate these projects. And then if you want to submit any supplemental planning and demonstration activities, you could do that as well and submit a blurb on that whenever you submit your application. And then lastly, project readiness. We simply want to know if the project's going to be completed from cradle to grave or from NEPA to construction within 5 years, and we asked for a timeline. So for equity, we have a couple of tools that can be used to determine your underserved community areas, and we ask for a percentage of that. And so the one that is shown here is the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, and you can put in your state, your county, your community, and your MPO area, and it'll compute how much of that is an equitable community. And then we also have the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, and you can just Google both of those to see, to be able to use that in your application submissions. So here's an example of one of our projects from the fiscal year 2022. It's in Modoc County, California. They received $12.9 million to improve 2 safety corridors in their high injury network, and they were in disadvantaged communities and tribal areas, and they experienced the most crash history in Modoc County on those 2 corridors. And so they are planning to install bicycle lanes, pedestrian crosswalks, do some speed control strategies, and also install infrastructure features for their disability community. And then another activity they plan to do is to update their crash data to the most recent 10 years and validate data sets and show the effectiveness of their safety improvements. And so this is an example of both an implementation project with supplemental activities. And that's all that I have. I think I took up all the 15 minutes, maybe I didn't, I don't know. But either way, I will be turning it over to Debbie. I think you're next.
Thank you, Jessica. Debbie's next. Debbie leads the Charlotte Department of Transportation. Debbie and her team are leaders in innovation, and they've established Charlotte's first strategic mobility plan, which shapes a safe and equitable transportation future for one of the country's largest cities. I believe top 25 in population? Top 20 in population. Please join me in welcoming Debbie for this presentation.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. I am thrilled to be here. I'd like to share some of the fantastic work that we're doing here in Charlotte around safe and equitable mobility. So Charlotte is one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. Currently, we are the 15th largest with 312 square miles and a population of over 900,000 people. And Charlotte has a diverse collection of assets. These assets are the building blocks of how we deliver mobility services to our residents and visitors of our beautiful city. Some of these assets are within my department's purview, and we work closely with our partners across the city and county to deliver transportation services. So the Charlotte Department of Transportation, or I affectionately call them CDOT, we maintain city streets, city bridges, traffic signals, and including those that are on state-maintained streets. We have the ability to work through a municipal agreement on that. We also maintain our fiber network, our sidewalks, and our traffic management cameras. Charlotte Area Transit System, however, maintains the light rail, the streetcar, and our fantastic bus system. And Mecklenburg County maintains our greenway system. So safe and equitable mobility, what is our vision? I'll tell you, in June 2022, the Charlotte City Council adopted our strategic mobility plan that establishes that vision for the future. But prior to 2022, we had strong policy around complete streets, Many of you may know them as the Urban Street Design Guidelines and our Transportation Action Plan. In addition, we developed a Vision Zero action plan in 2018, but they were not truly aligned until City Council adopted our Strategic Mobility Plan, following our 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So the mission is so foundational. We want to be clear in that mission. Charlotte will provide safe and equitable mobility options for all travelers, regardless of age, income, ability, race, gender, where they live, or how they choose to travel. And I think that is just the most important part of our mission statement there. There we go. So what does it mean to be safe? It means we will eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries, and we're going to measure that with our high injury network. And our goal is 0, because 0 is the only number. What does it mean to be equitable? It means living, working, and visiting in Charlotte will not require travel by car. We're going to measure that in single occupant trips compared to other modes. And our goal is a 50-50 mode share. It's huge, huge transformational to be able to have City Council adopt a 50-50 mode share. So Charlotte's investment strategy looks through the lens, and I'm going to use 6 lenses to look through. And let me be really clear, roads are and will continue to be the core of our mobility system. To increase capacity, safety, and comfort on these facilities, we will add or enhance traffic signals, street lighting, and new street connections to improve the network capacity. Innovation and technology. Building on our 20-plus years of intelligent transportation systems, we will look for opportunities to test the vehicle-to-everything technologies of the future, leveraging our highly connected system of traffic signal equipment. But at the same time, we're going to invest in our pavement markings and other infrastructure elements that will be used by the vehicles of tomorrow, but we know we can use them with the vehicles of today with advanced driver systems. Curbside management. And so really that strategy is crucial in dealing with our increasing demands on the curb space. So curbside management, as I define it today, includes our signs, our on-street parking, our loading zones, our electric vehicle charging stations, and really just that overall organization of the curb space. Transit capacity, reliability, and frequency will be essential in meeting the goals of our strategic mobility plan. And remember, I talked about our aspiration to be that 50-50 mode share. Well, you might ask yourself, where are we today? We're about 75% single occupant vehicle and 25% other modes. And so I can tell you transit is going to be that meaningful way that we move the needle in the right 50-50 direction. So in addition to filling the first and last mile gaps on transit, we really think bicycle, or another way to say that is micromobility. So think about scooters and other wheeled vehicles. We can serve those single modes for shorter trips, around a mile, and we want to do that with safe and comfortable facilities. And last, and certainly not least, in my lens of examples here, we truly begin every trip and end every trip as a pedestrian. And so we want to have thoughtful consideration about building for the pedestrian network. All of our roadway projects, all of our development projects include that component for pedestrians. So safe and equitable mobility, it's really about choices. And I hope through this lens I've shown you it really is about those choices. We want to have safe options for everyone, and especially those vulnerable road users. For those of you that saw the presentation yesterday, I'm really inspired by Ryan Sharp's presentation about Hoboken. They achieved Vision Zero. I'm a true believer that it can be done. And he talked about some amazing ways to do that. And they don't have to all be high cost. They can be low cost with high impact. So Charlotte is a Vision Zero city. And our slogan, our tagline, really embodies what it's about. Our streets are our responsibility, and that means everyone. It's actually really exciting for me to stand up and talk about Vision Zero and not have to tell you exactly what Vision Zero is all about. It's embodied in everything that we do, and people know what it's all about. The highlight that I'll make is that it really distinguishes itself from more traditional roadway safety approaches in that human error is inevitable, and those mistakes shouldn't be fatal. Our high injury network. So in Charlotte, we developed a high injury network, and the takeaway on this is that 100% of our fatal and serious injury crashes happen on just 10% of our streets. And so that's really impactful to me, because we know where we need to go to move the needle on this. So CDOT uses this information to partner with our police department. So Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department is an outstanding partner, and this really helps them with their speed enforcement efforts. And I don't think this will come as a surprise to you, but in Charlotte, we know speeding is the most frequent contributing circumstance in fatal and serious injury crashes. And so the thing I want you to leave with today is that we want to set the right speed limit. So important. Charlotte, we use 3 different models to assess what that right speed limit looks like. Many of you may be familiar with the U.S. limits model developed by FHWA. We also use an NCHRP model that looks at factors beyond just the 85th percentile speed. And last, there was an ITE publication that talked about an urban model that was developed in Canada, and we thought, wow, they're looking at their local streets a little bit differently. Pretty amazing. So Charlotte developed something like that. On all of our high injury network streets, we take a proactive approach and apply those 3 models to set the right speed limit. So what better way to illustrate safety than to show you a few of our projects completed in 2023 with our Vision Zero program. We installed leading pedestrian intervals at 41 intersections. And so this picture shows, it's just outside my office at the Government Center. What it's illustrating is the pedestrian symbol, the walking person, is highlighted, and that person gets a 3-second head start to enter the intersection and establish themselves before the traffic signal changes to green indication. Another success story, the Vision Zero Capital Improvement Program is one of our CIPs that City Council and our wonderful voters vote to support every bond every 2 years. And we installed 11 new pedestrian hybrid beacons and 4 rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And I just want to share with you all that I'm really proud to have worked on the first pedestrian hybrid beacon in the city of Charlotte. I got to sign and seal those plans. That's really awesome, 2007. You guys appreciate me. If I had my 15-year-old here with me today, he would go, "Oh, Mom, technology." I hope y'all can appreciate that. Okay, so who builds our city? It really is in partnership. We cannot do it alone. And I really appreciated this opening session for today on the P3 partnerships. So this picture is showing you the River District in Charlotte, and it's a 1,400 mixed-use acre development in West Charlotte, and it's going to use public and private dollars to build it. And it is one of the last areas in Charlotte that has this much undeveloped land. And so I reflect on it and I think, wow, this is what it was like when our engineers, our planners, our policymakers were looking at what Ballantyne was years ago. It's amazing. City Council approved public dollars for the widening of Dixie River roads and Garrison roads. adding streetscape improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as extending West Boulevard and Garrison. We used a really unique opportunity with TIG, so tax increment grants, and about $27 million in CIP funding. This is a great example of capacity improvements that are made to our transportation network, and in this case, this is W.T. Harris. So a Class 2 expressway, it's a state-maintained roadway in Charlotte. When the developer came in to add the fourth leg to this intersection, they were able to implement a reduced conflict intersection with pedestrian enhancements. And I just want to point out in this post-project photo, it really takes and eliminates some of the pedestrian conflict movements. We know that there still are pedestrians, believe it or not, on this type of roadway. People still want to cross the street, and this is a great way to do that. Here's a picture showing the developer 110 East, and that developer was Stiles and Shorenstein, and their development built this very wide streetscape for us. They also added amenities next to our light rail line, which is adjacent in this picture, and it shows that really infrastructure improvements do extend beyond the roadway. So shout out to all my friends at NCDOT. Who doesn't love a great NCDOT public hearing map? Thanks. And so we partner with the NCDOT when possible and where possible. This stretch of NC 160, which is Steel Creek Road, we are, today it is a 3-lane shoulder section, 2-way left turn lane, no consistent curb and gutter or sidewalk. And so CDOT is coming to the table with betterments to be able to include wider planting strips and a 12-foot multi-use path on both sides to provide for pedestrians and bicyclists. Here's an opportunity to showcase for you where we used excess pavement to be able to provide bicycle facilities. And so this photo shows the intersection of the Cross Charlotte Trail, which is to the left and right in this photo. And we also, if you can see kind of to the top of the picture, there is a 2-way cycle track. And for those that may not have heard about it, let me tell you what the Cross Charlotte Trail is. It's a combination of using off-street and on-street facilities for cyclists and pedestrians. And right now, today, it stretches 18 miles, but the goal is 30 miles. And it's a wonderful partnership with Charlotte City and Mecklenburg County Park and Rec. So the city of Charlotte is building many of those pieces and turning it over to Mecklenburg County for long-term maintenance. And so I want to share with you, this slide just represents a small fraction of grants, but thank you, Jessica and team. Huge shout out on the Safe Streets for All grant. Jessica was actually in town in Charlotte yesterday touring the Safe Streets for All, some of the areas. Included within that, we were awarded about $4.4 million for accessible pedestrian signals, leading pedestrian intervals, and pedestrian crossing projects. Somewhere around 26 projects, individual discrete projects are included within that. But we've been successful in a couple of other award areas, primarily around demonstrating our high injury network and our commitment to Vision Zero. And so with that, I would just like to wrap up and say I'm honored to be part of this outstanding conference. Y'all, this is a really big deal. This is a really well done conference. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Thank you, Debbie. Next, we have Tristan Winkler. Tristan is the director of the French Broad River MPO in Asheville, North Carolina. Please give Tristan a very warm welcome.
All right, thank you, Brian. My presentation's a little bit different. We're just getting started on our safety action plan in the French Broad River MPO and Land to Sky RPO region. So just really quickly, a little bit of background. The French Broad River MPO is based around the Asheville urban area in western North Carolina. Our planning area, you can see, is kind of the, as one of my employees noted, it looks like the blob of toothpaste that fell in western North Carolina. We cover Henderson, Buncombe, Haywood, and a little bit of Madison County. And what's shown in gray is covered by the Land of Sky Rural Planning Organization. And so for our safety action plan, we actually applied as a joint planning effort between the MPO and RPO. A lot of what we do in planning, we do in conjunction with the RPO. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't tend to recognize when they pass from the MPO to RPO. I do. But a lot of what we do, our travel demand model, we recently developed a Hellbender Regional Trail Plan. All of that we do in conjunction with the RPO. In general, our region is fairly tightly knit. We have a whole lot of commuters that come from Transylvania County, Madison County, into Buncombe and Henderson. And we have a whole lot of people coming from the urban areas to go visit, especially the destinations in Transylvania County. That's showing my bias. I go to DuPont like every week. But there's a whole lot of interconnection in our region, regardless of whether or not it's MPO or RPO. And so before I get into kind of how we presented to our board and stakeholders for kind of the reason for why we needed to pursue the Safe Streets for All planning grant, I've been told that I tend to focus on the gloom and doom as I'm pointing out problems that we need to fix. So before I get into that, I mean, just a couple of semi-positive notes is that, you know, our region definitely has pockets of concern, especially when it comes to safety. And, you know, a lot of our communities, Hendersonville, Asheville, have kind of gotten some additional considerations because of those safety concerns. But with a lot of different metrics, if you look at it county by county across the state, our counties tend to be roughly around the statewide average, for better or for worse. So that's a good thing. Not standing out in a lot of those regards, that's a good thing. And we have seen a lot of progress in terms of a decline in truck-related crashes, especially serious and fatal crashes in our region. Not just gloom and doom. But to get into kind of how we presented the reasoning to our board and our stakeholders is that even though our region in a lot of ways is right around the state average in a lot of metrics, the trends are not favorable. And so looking back 20 years, the total number of crashes in our region, that is not a great increase. In the past, when we've shown this, people have said, well, we've had a lot of growth. Yes, we've had a fair amount of growth, but the amount of growth doesn't match what's going on with our crashes. In terms of VMT, roughly the same story. I've been told by TPD to put that asterisk as they changed their VMT calculations. I don't think they changed it to 3- or 4-fold. So just to point out the increase, the trend in crashes is something that's not favorable. In terms of looking at fatalities, that's fortunately a little bit more flat in terms of our roadway fatalities across the 5-county region. Fatal and disabling crashes technically going down, but more of an increase kind of from 2016 into the present. But one thing that we noticed and highlighted is that, like a lot of the rest of the country, we're seeing a shift in who is being impacted and what modes are being impacted by the fatalities that are being observed. So especially our vulnerable road users, our bicyclists, pedestrians, motorcyclists, we've noticed in the data they're taking up a greater share of our roadway fatalities. At the start of the century, right around 20% of our roadway fatalities were those modes. We're now up to more than 30%. And looking at those trends specifically, again, the trend line is not moving in a favorable direction. Pedestrian crashes has been steadily increasing. Pedestrian fatalities as well, with the spike in 2020. And just to note, I think that was one of, I think the points that garnered a lot more support and consideration for pursuing safety planning funding. In 2020, we had a spike in pedestrian fatalities, again, like a lot of the rest of the country. What was a little bit different for us is that it was the first time that every single one of our counties had a pedestrian fatality. It kind of highlighted that this wasn't a concern in any specific place within our region. This is something that was happening across our entire region. And so I think that's something that, really helped to garner some awareness. Bicyclist crashes steadily increasing. Fatalities, much smaller sample size, but spiking in 2020 and 2021. Motorcyclist crashes increasing generally over the past 20 years, and motorcyclist fatalities. So I will note that a lot of times when we tend to focus on more vulnerable road user issues, there's oftentimes a preconception that those tend to be more urban concerns versus rural. But in our region, when you look at just overall crashes, the split between urban and rural, it roughly goes with our population. Our population, a little over half, resides in the urban areas. But in terms of the serious crashes and fatalities, we have an overrepresentation in rural areas. And to note, we also have an overrepresentation when you look at pedestrian fatalities. About 70% of the pedestrian fatalities in our region over the last 5 years have occurred in rural areas. There's a whole lot to unpack there. But so for us, we were really lucky. We have a board leadership that I think caught on that this was a major issue, was very supportive of pursuing a region-wide safety planning grant. And so, the case for why create a safety plan, first of all, getting into analyzing and prioritizing high-risk areas and helping to, make an effective use of the limited resources that are available. I think, especially for anyone who attended the presentation on inflation, for anyone looking at cost estimates lately, making the most of the resources we have available, getting the biggest bang for our buck, that was important before. I think it's going to become increasingly important, especially in the near term. Provide policy guidance to effectively use available resources to address safety issues, or at least not create more safety issues. I think that's something that can't be understated. We do have issues that are continuing to pop up. A lot of our higher growth areas in our region and a lot of the areas where we're seeing an increase in poverty and zero vehicle households are a lot of areas where we have more limited infrastructure. So how can we get into kind of some of those policy discussions? And the third, enabling partners to pursue some of the Safe Streets for All implementation funds. I won't lie, this was quite the carrot, as a lot of our local governments, they tended, when Safe Streets for All first came out, they saw the funding available and then noticed the planning requirement. There's a lot of our partners that are chomping at the bit and looking at the trends, justifiably so, to pursue and get implementation funds. Our planning partners, we've gathered a steering committee of our planning partners across the MPO and RPO. It's not all of our local governments, but all of our local governments will be involved at some point throughout the study. But a lot of the major ones being represented at every step of the way. Looking at what will be a successful safety plan, helping to grow and build some of those partnerships across our region, looking at implementation and quick wins. I think I always hear this as a planner, we don't want a plan that sits on a shelf. I might be the only one, I don't have any plans that sit on shelves. Where are these shelves? But understandably, people want to see action that comes from these plans, and especially in terms of some of the safety interventions, trying to get some of those quicker wins is key. Future grant opportunities, again, making our local governments eligible to pursue Safe Streets for All, as well as other grants for identified projects, and a consistent approach for safety in the region. I think this is something that it's more than just a little blurb. Having an educational component and a policy component where we can have a more consistent approach is something that I think would really be key to improving our safety. I won't go through all of this, but goals and objectives of the plan, leadership and technical commitment, data analysis, so getting into the data to help build that high injury network across our region, engagement and equity, making sure that we're reaching out to our underserved population and having them engaged throughout the planning process, performance measures and transparency. I will note every single year we bring safety performance targets to our board. And we have started bringing them months in advance because it has garnered so much discussion from our board. And a big part of that is that year after year, we bring the safety targets for adoption. And year after year, we've kind of shown that every single one of them, we are not meeting our targets. And in some cases, as you've seen, the trend lines are moving in the opposite direction of our targets. And so, having that conversation of how can we have achievable targets that are also aggressive in terms of, this is a problem we want to address and help to fix, I think that's going to be a key part of that. And also strategies and projects, lining up some of those priority projects so that our local governments and partners have a slate of projects that are prioritized and ready to go after additional grants. So some of the approaches, just to note, one of the things that's already been done, and a big thanks to Brian Mayhew and VHB, as a pedestrian safety study was undertaken in the city of Hendersonville. This was undertaken due to Hendersonville's documented pedestrian safety issues. I don't think I've told Brian this, but we did have a sit down with some of Hendersonville's leadership, and they were kind of like, where is this plan where did it come from? And explaining that, well, people in Raleigh realized that there was a significant safety issue in your community that needed to be addressed, I think is something that, that city especially has already had a pretty strong pedestrian focus. I think it's helped garner even more. So that's a fantastic study that was undertaken. And our consultant, VHB, is now starting to get into more of the specifics on the data. So what type of crashes are making up a lot of the serious and fatal crashes around our region? Where are those crashes taking place? Just looking at it, our two-lane roads, a lot of people come to our region with the beautiful, windy, mountainous roads. I can tell you, looking at DOT safety data, those beautiful roads tend to not do great in safety statistics. And when, just looking at the general time frame of when a lot of our crashes are taking place. And also who is overrepresented in terms of the crashes, the serious crashes and fatalities that are occurring across our region. And moving forward, there are plans for significant public engagement across the region. More technical steering committees, leadership summit is coming up. The plan has already been branded, and additional public engagement is planned throughout the year. And in terms of next steps, we do have a leadership summit coming up in, I believe, 2 weeks. And so that'll be exciting to help, again, raise awareness, raise support for undertaking this plan and helping to address the safety issues that are trending in the wrong way in our region, and moving forward with the plan from there. So I think that's right about 15 minutes, so thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Next, to round out our panel, we have King G. King G is the Director of Safety and Mobility for AASHTO. He directs the association's work and initiatives on traffic safety, system operations, and emerging transportation technology and mobility concepts. Please welcome G.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning. It's great to be here with you this morning. I appreciate the general session yesterday that focused on safety, and then the opportunity to be part of this panel, because in very stark terms, we are still in a crisis. And in many ways, I think we are in an inflection point because of the focus that the CEO level people are putting on this issue. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about context, about where we are today, how we got here, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. So to me, context is a big deal, because in understanding context, you will be able to understand what we need to do and some of the hurdles and the paradigm changes that are necessary. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the health crisis, the perspectives that have been evolving about traffic safety, and then rethinking the problem and the approach. Through Hoboken, Charlotte, and Asheville areas, you've seen some of the solutions that are being put forward. The reality is that we still have a long way to go. And so we need to be thinking hard about this problem and approach. And then some of the changes and tools that will be needed to help make the journey towards zero real. And then I'll talk a little bit briefly about the actual safety action plan that was adopted by the Board of Directors in November. COVID really put a highlight on the fatalities in this country. But the reality is we've been dealing with this since the very, very beginning. So when you think about fatalities, I assume you all know that when we talk about fatality rate, we're talking about deaths per 100 million vehicle miles of travel. Well, if you look at this chart, you will see that we've been dealing with this since the very, very beginning. If you looked at the first period through the 60s, we were on a steady decline in seeing the rates go down, even as the total numbers of fatalities were going up. And then in the period from the 60s to the 90s, we continue to see improvements, but the reality was we spiked total fatalities in 1972, 54,000 plus fatalities that year. And then, in spite of the fact that we saw a spike in the COVID years, the reality is that we flatlined in that decade before COVID at about 1.1, 1.5 fatalities, fatality rate. If you take a closer look in this period from 76 through 2022, that blue period, the 10 years before COVID, shows you how flatline we've become. What that points out is that the safety specialists, transportation safety professionals really knew we needed to do something drastically different. if we were going to attack this problem, because we're not making any progress. And if you look at the numbers, on the right-hand side, the green area is that period before COVID. Again, somewhere between 1.1 and 1.17, 1.19 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles of travel. The blue is what happened during COVID. So that increase from 1.1 to 1.3, we're talking about 2,000, 4,000 people a year more. So I want to talk a little bit about the context of where we've come from, because that helps you see where we might have to go. The first period of road building in this country, we were focused on building infrastructure that was going to last. And the mindset back then was, oh yeah, drivers are going to make mistakes. They're going to be errant drivers that go off the roadway. That's their problem. If they hit our infrastructure, we build it to last. So it was driven by excellence in engineering. The reality is that in the 60s, we began to realize this may not be such a good thing. And so we evolved into forgiving highways, clear zones for errant drivers to recover, crash cushions to mitigate the impact, breakaway signposts. At the same time, NHTSA was working on safer cars. So from the 60s onward, we've been really trying to figure out how to deal with this safety problem so that people can survive crashes. Then into the 90s and 2000s, we began to realize it's not just about moving cars fast. That in most situations, a roadway goes through a community. There are people, there are businesses, and we need to rethink how we design, and we need to rethink what the transportation solutions are. And we've come to this current situation where we are really focused on a safe system approach. If you heard yesterday from the NHTSA, Sinclair, it's coming to the realization that, not just the realization, but the acceptance that people make mistakes and they shouldn't have to die because of it. It's coming to the realization that while we've been dealing with the safety problem from an engineering perspective, from an educational perspective, from an enforcement perspective, and an emergency medical services perspective, it is a shared responsibility. As infrastructure people, we can't just stay in our lane. We need to see what we can do working together with the other E's, and then equity being the fifth E, on how we really deal with this safety problem. And if you're not familiar with that logo or that icon, you need to be. It really talks about what we're trying to achieve through a shared responsibility so that people do not have to die from making a mistake or because somebody else made a mistake. So that requires us to rethink the problem and the approach. So errant drivers, we have crash attenuation to mitigate the impacts, to reduce the severity of what happens. Hotspots, Debbie showed hotspots and how you deal with that. The reality is that that's chasing the problem. So we need to be thinking more systemically about what types of roadway characteristics engender more crashes. And so rumble strips was one of those things that are system-wide being implemented in many, many states. And then some of the underlying problems like conflict points. In most cases, you can reduce some conflict points. In others, you cannot reduce conflict points. But roundabouts is a big deal because it doesn't eliminate the conflict points. It maybe even creates more. But by slowing people down, you reduce the severity of what happens when there is a crash. And then infrastructure. We've been on this steady movement in our thinking from builders to operators, and now mobility. Not just moving cars and trucks, but moving people from point A to point B. And again, in a multimodal sense, your multimodal secretary here, I think her name is White, talked about integration. Well, when you talk about modal integration, you also can look at how modal integration increases safety. So in Asheville, we adopted a transportation vision for the future 2 years ago. And you will see that it doesn't talk about infrastructure. At the center of that icon is a community-centered transportation vision. Since 1956, when the Interstate Highway Program was adopted by Congress and funded by Congress, we have had that singular vision. Truth be told, for the last 10, 20, 30 years, we've completed the vision, and we haven't had a new vision for this country's transportation system. So AASHTO is looking at what we can do to support this community-centered transportation concept, and there are 6 aspirational goals around it, the top one being safety and security. So it's rethinking how we approach providing transportation to our citizens and the public. So in order to facilitate that, there's some changes that are needed, there's some tools that are needed. And the first thought change is that we need to be looking at safety from an agency-wide perspective, not just leaving it to the safety professionals, not just leaving it to the safety engineers. All of us have a role to play in moving the numbers. Second is to look at safety throughout the project lifecycle, not just having a project that is labeled safety, not just having a project that says all projects improve safety. That's true, but what can we do to really enhance safety throughout the project lifecycle, from planning, design, construction, on. And I don't have enough time, but I want to add some more illustration to what you've heard from Hoboken, from Charlotte, and from Asheville areas. These are changes that are underway. In the MUTCD that was just published in December, there's a shift in thinking about vulnerable road users. There's a shift in thinking about the 85th percentile as a way to set the speed limit. Truth be told, it was always a part of a guideline, but engineers, being engineers, we made it a standard. And so there's a lot of rethinking about how to set the speed limit. And what you see there is, contextually, there are different things that should be considered as part of the speed limit setting process. And you see a range of types of facilities there and the types of control on speed limits. So there's rethinking going on. A lot of states, a lot of communities are using this opportunity to set lower speed limits than what we have traditionally done. The challenge is that we've designed our infrastructure to facilitate speed. And it's going to require us redoing some of the infrastructure to, in a sense, be self-enforcing lower speeds. You heard about safety audits. That's part of looking at what is today. What Texas has done with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute is to come up with a safety audit process in the design phase. Not what is, but what could be. So they've developed a system where you quantify the safety benefits or disbenefits of different geometric designs, traffic control, and roadside design features. So you can evaluate and look at trade-offs between different design features before the final design decisions are made. And then reframing the classification. As you all know, functional classification is a set part of our mindset. What Ohio has done, and many states have done, is to reclassify based on land use. So instead of freeways, arterials, urban arterials, collectors, and distributors, it is by land use. And so that really reshapes our minds about what should be in these various land use contexts. And along the lines of a shared responsibility for safety, AASHTO, working through our various committees, working on different documents like the Green Book, the Roadside Design Guide, and Highway Safety Manual. And each of these iterations, we are recognizing we have a responsibility for vulnerable road users. And so there are treatments, there are policies, statements that deal with these, and there'll be, the Highway Safety Manual is up for ballot later this year, and there'll be a lot of features in there that will help deal with all users of the transportation system, not just cars and trucks and buses. I mentioned that we adopted a safety action plan, the board did, through recognition of this national crisis. Our then president, Roger Millar from Washington State, our current president from Wisconsin DOT, Craig Thompson, has emphasized safety. And so the board of directors adopted a resolution that adopted a safety action plan that recommits the states to really delivering a transportation system that is not just efficient, but safe. So if you want to find the document, if you just Google National Safety Action Plan, you will be able to get see a copy of the plan there. So there are a number of steps that we are committing to do. One is what we're doing here, sharing notable practices so that each state can learn from each other. At that board of directors meeting last year, this spring meeting, just last month, 19 CEOs from 19 states talked about the safety initiatives in their particular states and the results and the promising results that are beginning to become true. So we're seeing a very high level of commitment from the CEOs for changing the numbers here. Coordinated, consistent, data-driven decision-making. I mean, this characteristics of what is in the plan. I'm not going to take time to read it all, but the point is made again, partnerships. We're not alone in doing this. We need to work together with partners, not just the traditional ones, but some of the non-traditional ones that have a stake in seeing the numbers go down. So the structure of the Safety Action Plan, we deal with approaches, principles, and strategies. We deal with a common understanding of the safety goal. In the planning stage, in the design stage, in the construction stage, in the operation stage, there are different concepts of what safety means. So one of the key factors, one of the key elements of the Safety Action Plan is a common understanding of what safety is from a severity standpoint, from an exposure standpoint, and from a frequency standpoint. And then there are different actions. Again, I mentioned project lifecycle. There are tools at each phase, like I just illustrated in Texas and Ohio, that are aiming to help provide tools for designers, planners, construction people on what we can do to improve safety. Organization, how can we change the safety culture within our state DOT, local agency? All keys to making that difference. And lastly, even though we're in the middle of IIJA, reauthorization of IIJA is in our minds already. IIJA expires in September of 2026. So the aim is to provide policy positions to Congress from AASHTO by September of 2025. And safety will be a key part of that. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts about perspectives so that we know where we've been and where we need to go. Melissa Wando talked yesterday about lives that are affected. 40,000 lives lost, 2.3 million injuries. That's a person that has family members, is a spouse, is a son or daughter, is a neighbor, is a friend, is a colleague. One life is too much already. And as Melissa Wando also said yesterday, we are all advocates for safety. And so hopefully this gives you some thoughts on what you can do in your place where you are to help us get towards zero. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks, King, and thanks to all of our panel members. We do have a few minutes for questions. I will say if there's a question from the audience that anybody would like to ask, David over here has got a mic. You can raise your hand if you have one. If not, I'll got a couple for the panel. So one question I'll throw to the panel. So you do have one. All right. You beat me to it.
I'm Tim Anderson from Division 13. I see Tristan squirming a little bit already. I was going to ask him who the best division engineer he knows is, but that'd be self-serving. The question I have, when we talked about this, I sat in one of the meetings where we talked about our goals, and it was enlightening, to say the least. It was, I think it's supposed to be 15 minutes, turned into about 45. And one of the things we talked about in there was public awareness and education. And what are y'all's thoughts on how do we do a better job of that? You know, there's all kinds of media out there, but a lot of folks who drive still, you know, watch the news and things like that, but you don't see very much. I remember the South Carolina advertisements years ago about work zone safety, you know, where the car drives through the building, but I don't see much on our end of it. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'll jump in and just share with you that in Charlotte, our Vision Zero action plan describes a very robust community engagement. We have dedicated professionals that are Vision Zero activists. We stood up a task force. While CDOT is in the lead of that task force, we have somewhere around 60 people participating, representing 25 different agencies, with the idea being that everyone in those levels are safety advocates, and that we can provide that information and do our part. And so we're out there in the community telling our story using social media. I'll also say I really look to NCDOT's social media presence as well. I think it's very robust. It's very safety oriented as well. And so a lot of great partners out there that we can look to for examples that we're using in Charlotte.
There are 3 examples that come to mind of states that are doing something in the educational perspective. Missouri DOT has a Buckle Up, Phone Down campaign where they enlist commitments from schools, from companies, from students to not be distracted when they're driving. Georgia DOT has a series of driver education curriculum that they develop and provide to teachers to use in the classroom. And so that's aiming to educate the younger people before they even get their licenses. As you may know, if you get into a car and you have a kid and you don't buckle up, your kid will remind you to buckle up. So we're trying to get the younger generation with that mindset about safety before they get their licenses. And then Delaware. Delaware DOT has a campaign called Del Aware, to really focus on the safety challenges in their state.
Yeah, and can you guys hear me at all? I did it. Yeah, I think a slightly different aspect, but I do think education is an extremely important component of that. Both in terms of behaviors, but I'll also point out a lot of the work that NCDOT is doing in terms of safety implementation. Tim tied for my favorite division engineer with Wanda Payne. It's neck and neck, Tim. You know, I think with projects like the Merriman Avenue Road Diet, having that educational component of, you know, why is a road diet being suggested? What are the safety benefits? And making that clear to the public and a lot of stakeholders, I think is something that, at least from where I sit, it's getting better, but it's still an uphill challenge. I think we've seen projects where roundabouts, especially, communicating the benefits to that, it can be a challenge. I think at one of our public meetings, a proposed roundabout was referred to as a human blender. And so having the educational piece of like, we aren't trying to add things like medians and like roundabouts because we want to make it harder for people to make lefts. there are real safety benefits. And I think things like FHWA's proven safety countermeasures, I love the way they phrase that. I think that's been key in kind of helping point out, there are real documented safety benefits towards what NCDOT is trying to do, and trying to make sure that we can get people on board and get those parts of projects implemented and not removed at, due to public outcry.
Well, thank you all for a wonderful conversation. Appreciate your attendance today. Appreciate the panelists being here. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. It's right at noon. So with that, I'm going to reintroduce Board Member Megan Phillips to provide some closing comments.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you so much, panelists, for being here and your passion and dedication to safe transportation in North Carolina. We really appreciate everything you do for us. As a, as a quick reminder, as we wrap up today, for those of you who are logging professional development hours, there will be a self-reporting email form that will be sent out by Houseman and Associates for attendees who registered and checked in. Again, thank you all so much for being here with us today, and safe travels as you travel back home later this afternoon. Thank you.